Hi, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Weekly Reads, where we give you 5 book recommendations all in one show. My name's Devon. I'm a librarian at the Worcester Public Library, just like my co-host, Joy. What do you think about this snow, Joy?
Oh, isn't it awful? Grim, bleak. Happy Halloween.
Yeah, happy Halloween.
Yeah.
Most of what Joy and I are talking about today, you can get online with the Libby or Overdrive app on your phone or device. You can also use Overdrive in your browser with your laptop or desktop. And don't forget, we're doing physical pickup of items too. So if you aren't sure how to access any of those materials, just call the library and we'll help you out. So now I'm going to share my screen so that you can see what we have lined up for you this week. And as usual, I'll be doing the fiction, Joy will do the nonfiction, and we have our coming soon title. So for my first choice, we have Goodnight Beautiful by Amy Malloy, and that's the author there on the right-hand side. This book came out in October of this year. The author has been called a master of clever misdirection, and this book is being called a cross between Gillian Flynn's Gone Girl and Stephen King's Misery, which fascinates me. It's a most anticipated book by Crime Reads, BuzzFeed, Pop Sugar, Bustle, and the New York Post. In the book, newlyweds Sam and Annie are head over heels and excited to say goodbye to New York City and start a life together in Sam's hometown upstate. Or, as it turns out, a life where Annie spends most of her time alone, while Sam, who is a therapist, works long hours in his downstairs office, tending to the egos of his mostly female clientele. Little does Sam know that through a vent in his ceiling, every word of his sessions can be heard from the room upstairs. The pharmacist's wife contemplating divorce, the painter whose boyfriend doesn't satisfy her. Who could resist listening? Everything is fine until the French girl in the Mini Cooper shows up, and Sam decides to go to work and not come home, throwing a wrench into Sam and Annie's happily ever after. Library Journal said, the author employs some of the most believable and jaw-dropping twists since Gone Girl in this single sitting read. Readers will be flipping back to see how she performed sleight of hand right in front of them. Along with a suspense plot, Malloy adds depth with critiques of gender conventions that make you question your assumptions. She breathes new life into the unreliable narrator genre in a book everyone will be talking about. And yeah, people were talking about this book before it came out. There's wait lists on the different formats. So if you're interested, make sure you get on that wait list as soon as you can. Here's one from Joy.
You really have to stop presenting books that I would not ordinarily pick up that end up intriguing me. I just have too much to read as it is.
Librarian problems.
Thanks a lot. Okay, my first choice for this week is This Land is Their Land, The Wampanoag Indians, Plymouth Colony, and the Troubled History of Thanksgiving by David J. Silverman. 400 years ago, this coming November, a small group of immigrants we now know as pilgrims held a feast to commemorate their first year in a new land. And, as is fitting, they invited their Indian allies, the Wampanoags, without whom they would not have survived. So far, so good. We all know that story. Everybody partied, consuming copious quantities of meat and fish, drinking strong waters, wrestling and firing muskets with reckless abandon. Author David Silverman tells us that they probably prayed because that is what these people did, but if so, it wasn't mentioned in contemporary accounts. Calls to mind a frat party, 17th century style, right? Maybe irreverent, but true. After it was all over and time to mop up, the Wampanoags exited stage left, having implicitly given their blessing to the English colonial enterprise. And for all practical purposes, they disappeared from the pages of our history books. So far, not so good and not so true. In This Land is Their Land, Silverman asks us to re-examine our deeply entrenched assumptions about Thanksgiving. This time from the perspective of the Wampanoags, who welcomed the Pilgrims and suffered mightily for it. Now, festivals celebrating harvest are common worldwide, and New England Puritans not infrequently designated days of Thanksgiving to commemorate God's providence or judgment. Although these generally involved fasting, not feasting. However, it was not until the Civil War that President Abraham Lincoln declared the fourth Thursday in November as a national day of Thanksgiving. And it was not until then that Thanksgiving became firmly identified with the story of, quote, our Pilgrim fathers, unquote. Why? Silverman says that it is because historians deliberately fostered a founding myth that featured white, family-oriented, English-speaking, pious Protestants. Needless to say, the Wampanoags were moved off center stage and forced to serve as mere bit players in the role of friendly Indians in our national pageant. Not so true and not so fast. The Wampanoags were not simply naive, kindly, quote, savages who wanted to help. Their leader, whom we know as Massasoit, was a strategist who chose to ally with the English against his adversaries, the Narragansett, in a political landscape destabilized by the near destruction of native populations by disease. That, say Native American activists, was his terrible mistake. But despite hundreds of years of a struggle to survive, identity intact, the Wampanoags did not disappear. They are here. And for some of them, Thanksgiving is considered a day of mourning. However, Native Americans value family ties and gratitude as much as anyone else. And they don't wish to end the tradition of serving a really delicious meal to friends and relatives gathered around the table. Instead, they ask, maybe demand, to be invited once again to the party, this time as full participants whose long, difficult history and rich, ongoing cultural legacy is honored. This would make for a more complex, nuanced, multifaceted, and not always comfortable national pageant, but it would be a far deeper and truer one.
Oh, with November just a couple days away, this is a very timely choice.
Yeah, I chose to hop over Halloween and go right to Thanksgiving.
All right, and here's our next fiction title. The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, and that's Victoria Schwab there on the right. This book also came out in October of this year. It was a best of book according to CNN, Amazon, Goodreads, Bustle, Pop Sugar, BuzzFeed, Barnes & Noble, Kirkus, Lambda Literary, Book Riot, and a ton more. Neil Gaiman called this book the most joyous evocation of unlikely immortality. In the book, things start in France in 1714 when, in a moment of desperation, a young woman makes a Faustian bargain to live forever and is cursed to be forgotten by everyone she meets. Thus begins the extraordinary life of Addie LaRue, and a dazzling adventure that will play out across centuries and continents, across history and art, as a young woman learns how far she will go to leave her mark on the world. But everything changes when, after nearly 300 years, Addie stumbles across a young man in a hidden bookstore, and he remembers her name. This book got starred reviews from everybody: Kirkus, Publishers Weekly, Library Journal, Book List, and Book Page.
Wow.
I know. Slate said, Addie is epic yet intimate, sweeping but not sprawling. If Addie shows anything, it's that the impact of our actions and interactions can be vaster and longer lasting than predicted. Much like the 7 freckles that sprinkle Addie's face, we create our own constellations. And as we live through these darkened days, I feel brighter for having added Addie to mine. This book really sounds like it's got everything. I love the time travel aspect. I think it's really interesting that she's cursed with nobody remembering her. And I really could use something to brighten my days lately. So if you are in the same boat, we have the book in multiple formats, but it is super popular. So make sure you get your name on that wait list. And here's one from Joy.
Well, my next choice is ArtCurious, Stories of the Unexpected, Slightly Odd, and Strangely Wonderful in Art History by Jennifer DeSalle. Do you think art history is boring?
No.
I don't either. But author Jennifer DeSalle, curator of modern and contemporary art at the North Carolina Museum of Art, believes that many do. And she understands, she says, because once upon a time, she did too. The first entry in ArtCurious is entitled, Your Mother's Favorite Painter Was a Badass. And in it, she writes of trudging along in her mother's wake on an obligatory family excursion to a local museum on the hunt for water lilies and haystacks. And being, you guessed it, utterly bored, not to mention crabby and footsore. Devin, any idea who her mother's favorite painter might have been?
I am sure that it was Monet.
Bingo! Monet is every mother's favorite painter. And you know, as soon as you become a mother, no matter who your favorite painter might have been, it instantly becomes Monet. Well, DeSalle's attitude changed when she reluctantly signed up for an art history class in college, and much to her surprise, got hooked. Since then, DeSalle has become an art history evangelist on a mission to communicate her love of art through her podcast, also called ArtCurious, and now this book. DeSalle aims to accomplish her goal by immersing her reader not in the facts and figures of mainstream art history, but in backstory. And trust me, she has intriguing stories to tell. Every single one of these essays is interesting. And each time I finished one, I wanted to learn more. Who knew that the Mona Lisa had been stolen, maybe several times, and that some believe that the painting we see, or don't, considering the crowds, when we visit the Louvre, may be a copy or an outright forgery? Did you know that a recently discovered Leonardo Salvator Mundi was purchased at auction for $450 million? Then disappeared into the holdings of a mysterious Saudi prince and has never been seen again? And guess what? It may not even be a genuine Leonardo. You've probably heard that Vincent van Gogh committed suicide, but were you aware that some scholars, admittedly outliers, believe that he may have been killed, either accidentally or intentionally? And how about Jack the Ripper's possible identity as the English painter Walter Sickert? Throughout, DeSalle establishes a light, breezy, irreverent tone. She is, after all, committed to removing pomposity from the study of art. But her essay on Hieronymus Bosch goes beyond the merely amusing to laugh out loud hilarious. Why? I'll give you a hint. How does the phrase 600-year-old butt song from hell strike you? If you want to know more about what that phrase is all about, and who wouldn't, you'll just have to read the book.
Well, I cannot imagine laughing at anything about Hieronymus Bosch, so I'm going to have to check this book out.
You will this time.
All right, and next we have our coming soon title, but before I change slides, don't forget to give us some likes and loves if you enjoy our program, and feel free to share this video with your friends who are always looking for book recommendations. All right, and here's our coming soon title. This is Moonflower Murders by Anthony Horowitz. That's him pictured on the right, holding the British version of the book cover. This book comes out on November 10th, which is a Tuesday, and it's number 2 in the Magpie Murders series. This book is being called a brilliantly complex literary thriller with echoes of Agatha Christie. In the book, retired publisher Susan is living the good life. She's running a hotel on a Greek island with her boyfriend. It should be everything she's always wanted, but she's exhausted. And then the Trehernes come to stay. The story they tell about a murder that took place on the same day and in the same hotel in which their daughter was married on the Suffolk coast fascinates Susan. One of her former writers knew the murder victim and visited that location. He based his third book on that very crime. The Treherne's daughter, Cecily, read the mystery and believed the book proves that the man convicted is innocent. When the Trehernes reveal that Cecily is now missing, Susan knows she must return to England and find out what really happened. Author A.J. Finn said, Moonflower Murders showcases Horowitz's full battalion of strengths: whiplash plotting, leather-smooth prose, bold energy, and above all, the bright spark of joy that ignites the best fiction, the joy of a storyteller finding new ways to dazzle his audience. So I know we have a lot of fans of Agatha Christie style mysteries out there. And if you are one of them, this book sounds like it might be right up your alley. We do have a catalog record for you to place a hold on, and hopefully this will show up in Overdrive and Libby soon. But that brings us to the end of our episode for this week. Don't forget that if you're looking for a book recommendation or a read alike for your favorite author, you can just put that in the comments below and join us. See what we can do. Otherwise, hope to see you next time.
And by the way, Anthony Horowitz is better than Agatha Christie. Okay.
Ooh,
get a flood of mail about that one. But anyway, see you later, fellow readers.